The Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has committed to remove the Great Lakes wolf population from the Federal Register by the end of the calendar year 2011.
It is widely acknowledged by both state and federal wildlife officials that wolves have long achieved their biological recovery goals, and the time has long passed for the species to be removed from the endangered species list.
The Law Enforcement Division does support the position of the Michigan Wolf Management.
Our patience with this process is wearing thin, particularly when the reasons for the stalemate have nothing to do with the biology and management of the wolf and everything to do with the forces who profit from this delay and have neither the interests of sound wildlife management nor the interests of Michigan in mind.
But until the federal protection and anti-hunting litigation is resolved, wolves will be managed using the wrong tools, and many Michigan citizens will continue to be frustrated.
Seems like the logical progression would be to go from endangered, as the species requires, for it then to go to the threatened status. How is it that with the wolf we were skipping the threatened status?
Because there's 600 that's why.
It's not a requirement under the Endangered Species Act to go in that stepwise process. You can go directly from an endangered listing to a delisting, or you can, directly list a species as an endangered species. We did try to do that in 2003, where we reclassified that eastern distinct population segment to threatened status. But since that time, all of our analysis, everything points to the fact that the species does not even meet the definition of a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act.
And I'm a UP field veterinarian for the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. My question is, in the past, we've always paid indemnity for animals that were killed by wolves to the farmers who lost them. Now, if the wolf is delisted, would there still be consideration for monies to help pay for animals that are killed by wolves? Last 2 years, for example, or in 2008 to 2010, there were in the UP alone 195 head of cattle killed by wolves. We paid over $30,000. Do you know if any indemnity is being considered in the proposal?
Apparently there are recommendations for farm animal management which are provided to the farmers. Is there any way to monitor compliance with that? Because there certainly are some steps, like bringing your animals in at night, which would reduce predation. Well, you can do it.
No, you can't.
Used to do it in Vermont.
Guys. They're nuts. They're freaking nuts.
When
Hang
we
some
go to
flags
a
and some
farm,
cones.
we often provide husbandry advice within our capabilities. And there's really not much under the law as far as, there's certainly nothing the DNR can do. It'd all be Michigan Department of Agriculture. The one thing we do notice is livestock death pits are a direct link to depredation. And though there is a law that prohibits those in the state of Michigan, so that is something, if we do find that at a farm, that we can say to the farmer that, hey, we're not going to help you out, we're not going to be able to provide payment if those things aren't cleaned up. But as far as moving cattle in, putting up different fences, as long as they comply with holding those cattle in, that's out of our purview. We're not able to enforce any of those types of things. As long as he's following Michigan standards for agricultural practices, the DNR has nothing to say about that.
I don't know, this may be a statement and not a question, but with what Mr. Richardson said a minute ago, with all due respect to the lady there, Miss Warren, Mrs. Warren, I believe that the people up here, we live with these killing machines, and I believe that our opinions, written opinions, should hold more merit than some people downstate that, you know, are longtime animal lover types, and so I just wanted to let you know that's how I feel. Thank you.
Okay. If it can't happen this time, if it can't get delisted this time, we can't get put under state control, you know, totally delisted, I guess the feeling will be that the you know, the Endangered Species Act was broken.
Been on the commission for 5 years, and I can't think of one thing that people call me on that has more of an impact on them. I mean, I don't go through one day where people don't talk about wolves.
Okay, there was another gentleman over here.
I'm Adam Sherman from northern Delta County. I had a quick question for the DNR. What I want to know is what's the real population of wolves? I'm not interested in packs with collar, radio collared packs. I'm not interested. I see tons of wolves. I know you don't count singles, pairs, doubles, whatever. I want to know the total number of wolves, and I want to know the diseases that wolves carry. I only care up to 50 possible diseases. And one of the most, I mean this more for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the kind of kooks granulosis. I have friends that are Save Western Wildlife, and they were really hitting on this because the whole thing going on with Yellowstone and wiping all the elk out. Sure.
It's the wolf scat.
Okay.
If you breathe it in, you can tapeworms and you can die domestically.
I'm gonna, which one do you want me to cover first? Population or parasites? Well, since you're talking parasites, the Echinococcus granulosis cycle is already here in Michigan. It's not something new. It's already found in coyotes and dogs as well. So it's nothing that hasn't been out there already as far as that goes. There aren't any new parasites that the wolves have brought with them from Minnesota or Ontario when they came back to Michigan. As far as your population estimate, the real population number is 687. That includes all wolves, not just collared wolves. That's the minimum winter population. Certainly on the ground right now, we're probably 1,200, maybe 1,400 with all the pups. Pups have very low survival rates. Approximately 30 to 35% of those pups are going to make it to their first winter. Wolves themselves have very high mortality rates. An old wolf is about a 5-year-old wolf in the wild. So they don't live that long. It's not easy being a large predator on the landscape. As far as pairs go, our estimate, which is about plus or minus 53 animals, is the minimum, like I said. So it's plus or minus 53. The way we get that is a track survey. And since 2007, we have sliced the UP up into 21 units. And we cover about 60% of the UP each year. It was just becoming too daunting of a task to cover that whole UP every year. One, it was expensive, and we didn't have the manpower to do something like that. Ideally, yeah, we'd love to cover the whole UP each and every year, but we can't do it anymore.
I have one question. If it takes this long to get it off, get it delisted, and they figure it has to go back on, will it take this long to get it back on?
And I am from Ewan, Michigan, and I have learned to live with wolves, Mr. Lucas. I have a wolf pack on that uses my property. But at any rate, my question is more toward Brian, I think, but it's related to this as well. The impact on the business funding.
If so, how would that management occur when the species ranges overlaps?
Is there, what is it right now, there are roughly 200 or so species that you all have deemed worthy of putting on the threatened or endangered, but they're pending and therefore they're not getting the coverage that the Act would provide. Is there a high chance, a medium chance, that if you were to
surveys and all that stuff, any solutions as to how you're going to fill that void by USDA?
A rural area in Marquette County, northern Marquette County, remote area, and I haven't had any problem with wolves, and I think wolves are amazing animals. I like having them here. I originally was in favor of delisting, but a lot of the crazy opposition based on basically 15th century folklore is what has caused me to be concerned about delisting. And right now, I think with all the poaching that's been going on, that delisting isn't a good idea. And one of the things that causes me to be concerned is the state legislation that went through that was allowing people to kill wolves that were in the act of preying upon cattle or dogs. Well, I agree in principle on that. The way the legislation was worded, I think, represents a real threat to the future of wolves in Upper Michigan. And I guess I'd like to direct this question to Captain Hopkins. And if the delisting goes through and that state legislation goes into effect, and the part of the legislation that concerns me is the part that allows lethal means to destroy wolves that are in the act of preying upon the dog or the cattle. And unfortunately, the legislation doesn't define act of preying as to what that means. And if it were interpreted broadly, it would allow a person to kill a wolf in almost any sort of circumstance and would represent a real threat to the future of wolves. I'm wondering how you, as the law enforcement officer, are going to interpret that law if it goes into effect. That phrase, act of preying upon.
Gotta be kidding me. You can keep the wolves then. Keep the thing.
I don't know necessarily that we would have to interpret active preying. We've got several instances right now where we have coyotes and raccoons where if they're doing or about to do damage, you're allowed to harvest those to prevent that damage from happening. So what we would have to do is look at it in an individual case and determine what the specifics were of that particular instance. What was the conduct of the wolf at the time? What was the conduct of the individual who took lethal means to harvest that wolf? What were the threats to either livestock, pets, or human safety? So it's more something that we'd have to look at on an individual basis, just like we do in many circumstances right now with other types of species that are out there that we have under control.
It seems like it would be very hard for the dog owner or cat owner to know under what circumstances they're allowed to kill wolf.
Well, it's got your dog by the neck. That's what you shoot.
I would suggest that, again, that we would look at it on an individual basis and we would investigate, and based on all the circumstances there, what was the proximity of the animal to the livestock, whether or not there was the imminent danger or immediate threat. It's something that I can't give you an answer on because obviously every individual circumstance is going to vary. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was one hand up here.
I'll just stop from here. Just for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, if this doesn't go through, and for the Department of Natural Resources, what are we supposed to do as residents here in Michigan? Sit in our hands? And this also goes to the pro-wolf crowd on the right. You know, we try and work with you folks as much as we can. You know, back and forth, is some wolves better than no wolves? Because our forefathers killed them off in the past. Is that what you want? Because you need to let something go through to have some kind of regulation on us, otherwise it's going to be, what are we going to do? If it doesn't go through, the deer herd is suffering. I mean, there's no deer anymore. I mean, maybe far down Menominee County, where I hunt northern Delta County, there's no deer. Yeah, you say no. There's no deer.
We'll let them answer,
so yeah,
okay?
the answer. These guys want 1 million wolves. We don't want any wolves. We're trying to compromise somewhere in the middle. It's compromise. The world is about compromise. Black and white. Gray area. Gray area. Okay? That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.